The abolitionist movement was a social and political push for the immediate emancipation of all slaves and the end of racial discrimination and segregation. Advocating for emancipation separated abolitionists from more moderate anti-slavery advocates who argued for gradual emancipation and from free soil activists who sought to restrict slavery to existing areas and prevent its spread. Radical abolitionism was partly fueled by the religious fervor of the Second Great Awakening, which prompted many people to advocate for emancipation on religious grounds. The abolitionist movement became increasingly prominent in northern churches and politics beginning in the 1830s, which contributed to the regional animosity between North and South leading up to the Civil War. The American Civil War brought women new responsibilities on the battlefield and at home. Many became providers for their families, managing farms and businesses while male relatives served in the army. Many also contributed to the Union or Confederacy. Some raised money and supplies through Ladies' Aid and Soldiers' Aid societies, as well as the U.S. Sanitary Commission, a private agency that operated across the North and became critical to the Union victory. Others nursed soldiers. Louisa May Alcott, author of the beloved novel Little Woman, worked as an army nurse, spied on the enemy, cooked and laundered for enlisted men, and served as uniformed battlefield helpers called vivandiers. Unknown numbers of women fought as soldiers by concealing their identities and enlisting as men.
The United States, on the verge of civil war, contained two distinct economies. At the beginning of the war, the South was still dominated and dependent on the sale of staples to the entire world. The North was well on its way toward a commercial and manufacturing economy which would have a direct impact on its war-making ability. The North produced 17 times more cotton and woolen textiles than the South, 30 times more leather goods, 20 times more pig iron, and 32 times more firearms. The North produced 3,200 firearms to every 100 produced in the South. The Civil War interrupted the rhythms of commercial life by destroying lives and property. This was especially true in the Confederacy. From 1861 onwards, the Confederate government struggled to find the guns, food, and supplies needed to have an army. The Union's blockade of the Atlantic prevented the Confederacy from financing the war with cotton sales to Europe. The war also pushed the U.S. government to take unprecedented steps. Congress raised tariffs and passed the first national income tax in 1862. As the war dragged on, inflation also hit the North. Workers demanded higher wages to pay rents and buy necessities. The United States never had a policy of impressment for food and supplies. The factories and the farms of the North successfully supplied Union troops, while the federal government found ways to pay for the war.
During the era of the Civil War, the United States of America came into being around the Age of Enlightenment, an era in Western philosophy in which writers and thinkers, rejecting the perceived superstitions of the past, instead chose to emphasize intellectual, scientific, and cultural life, centered upon the 18th century, in which reason was advocated as the primary source for legitimacy and authority. Enlightenment philosophers envisioned a republic of science, where ideas would be exchanged freely and useful knowledge would improve the lot of all citizens. The United States Constitution itself reflects the desire to encourage scientific creativity. It gives the United States Congress the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries.
During the mid-1930s, as Germany and Japan were busy building large militaries, the United States concentrated on domestic issues. The nation was in depth of the Great Depression. By the late 1930s, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party had each developed a distinct ideology strongly influenced by the Great Depression experience. President Roosevelt, elected in 1933 and Democrat, introduced a set of programs designed to combat the suffering caused by the economic crisis. The new programs were collectively known as the New Deal. To administer these programs, the federal government greatly expanded in size and power. From that point on, the Democratic Party, led by Roosevelt, stood for a big central government that would support social services and provide economic assistance for the aged, disabled, and poor. People referred to members of the Democratic Party as liberals because they look to the government to improve their financial security and healthcare, things not traditionally supported by the government prior to the 1930s. Before the World War II, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, the main political concerns in the United States involved social and economic issues. During the war, the key issues driving U.S. political debates and election campaigns were foreign policy and national defense. The two main political parties in the United States, the Republicans and the Democrats, held to their traditional ideas of how the nation should be governed. The Republicans favored the idea of a relatively small and limited federal government, whereas the Democrats preferred the federal government to take a leading role in providing services and protections for citizens. During World War II, President Franklin Roosevelt was re-elected. He was a Democrat that greatly influenced U.S. politics during the war.
The United States, on the verge of civil war, contained two distinct economies. At the beginning of the war, the South was still dominated and dependent on the sale of staples to the entire world. The North was well on its way toward a commercial and manufacturing economy which would have a direct impact on its war-making ability. The North produced 17 times more cotton and woolen textiles than the South, 30 times more leather goods, 20 times more pig iron, and 32 times more firearms. The North produced 3,200 firearms to every 100 produced in the South. The Civil War interrupted the rhythms of commercial life by destroying lives and property. This was especially true in the Confederacy. From 1861 onwards, the Confederate government struggled to find the guns, food, and supplies needed to have an army. The Union's blockade of the Atlantic prevented the Confederacy from financing the war with cotton sales to Europe. The war also pushed the U.S. government to take unprecedented steps. Congress raised tariffs and passed the first national income tax in 1862. As the war dragged on, inflation also hit the North. Workers demanded higher wages to pay rents and buy necessities. The United States never had a policy of impressment for food and supplies. The factories and the farms of the North successfully supplied Union troops, while the federal government found ways to pay for the war.
World War II from 1939 to 1945. It boosted research in science and technology through government funding. It led to new technologies that transformed American life after 1945. The demands of the war inspired the production of new substances and materials such as the antibiotic penicillin, the insecticide DDT, and synthetic rubber. New technologies such as radar, the jet engine, helicopters, and electronic computers all were wartime innovations. With the creation of the atomic bomb, American scientists influenced the political and cultural atmosphere of the rest of the century and beyond. Most scientists in the early 1940s were engaged in research that served military needs. The U.S. government poured millions of dollars into research projects that would help win the war. There were major advances in transportation, communication, weapons, and intelligence gathering technologies, but government funding also brought science and politics together in a new way. For the first time, the U.S. government funded scientific research that would help it achieve its political aims. Perhaps the most important and controversial of these projects was the research on the atomic bomb. On January 2019, the actor from the hit show Empire, Jussie Smollett, reported to the Chicago police that he had been subjected to a violent hate crime by a couple of men who had tied a noose around neck while shouting homophobic and racist slurs to his face. The case has evolved severely since then, because nearly a month after the incident was reported, the Chicago police reported that they had a lot of evidence that indicated that the actor was lying about the assault and had fabricated the incident to further his career. Smollett was charged with filing a false report with the police and disorderly conduct. The police believed that he had paid two brothers to attack him, one being the perpetrator being the actor's personal trainer and also the one that worked with him on Empire. He was later indicated by a jury in Cook County for the 16 counts of disorderly conduct he had been charged with, as well as filing a false police report, although he was later released. This case is not the first in American history where a person has fabricated hate crime for sympathy or attention, or for a diverse range of other reasons. An African-American student at North Carolina Central University, Crystal Gayle Mangum, in 2006 accused three white students from Duke University of raping her. The three students were members of the Duke University men's lacrosse team, and the incident had allegedly occurred in a party they had hosted. In most cases, rape wouldn't be considered a hate crime, but due to the racial dynamics of the case, the district attorney decided to try it as a hate crime, which led to his disbarment even after the allegations were found to be fake. The prosecutor was also believed to be exploiting the case to further his political ambitions. Both Mangum's and Smollett's cases were evoked contentious discussions regarding legal due to process, real and fake hate crimes, and sexual and racial-based violence. I would say that one of the methods that improved my learning environment and my ability to captivate the information was doing projects. It helped me truly learn and understand all the areas of information rather than just taking a test, because I usually study for it and then forget everything after it. I'm not good at taking tests, and I think that projects show my capabilities and how well I know the information rather than how well I can memorize it. I also like that we took some quizzes, because even though I'm not the best at it, it was good practice for the future, and it showed the gaps I had in the content we learned. I learned that for a team to work together smoothly, everyone has to compromise and put in their part. I learned that as a team member, I push myself to work harder and do better because people are depending on me. And just overall, that for everyone for the team to run smoothly, everybody has to work hard and put in effort and show up and be there to work with your group.
ACT UP, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, was established to drive government attention and research toward a cure. A key early goal of that movement: forced down the price of AZT, the first HIV drug. Because of ACT UP's effectiveness, the price of AZT went from $10,000 a year to $3,200 a year. Now, AIDS activists, drawn from the older generation and from a new one, are working again to bring down the prices of HIV medication. This time, the drug is called Truvada. The list of the price for the drug is $1,780 a month, or $21,360 per year, more than 350 times the cost of generic version of the drug available in most other countries. Prep for All activists are using some of the same broad tactics as ACT UP, but also increasing their activity behind the scenes. Prep for All is shaming Gilead, the inventor of the new drug, into voluntarily lowering the price of Truvada and pressuring the government into challenging Gilead's patent of the medication, so generic competition might force the price down. From Gilead's perspective, Truvada is under patent for a limited time, and shareholders want to see profits. Gilead also argues the price isn't the problem. Lack of awareness, stigma, and homophobia are the problems. Prep for All activists are generally dismissive of these efforts. The activists are also focused on the government's role in allowing the price of drip water to stay so high. So far, neither the CDC nor Gilead have shown signs, at least publicly, of being moved by Prep for All's arguments. I think the two best methodologies of learning this year were the movies and the projects. I think the movies were great, since we would take the graded notes during these movies, and also, it made the learning fun for me. I especially enjoyed the movies because I get bored easily when I have to take notes and often get distracted. So having a fun way to learn made me able to concentrate in class. Also, the projects were very helpful in my learning this year. Since we went into extreme detail with our projects, it allowed me to learn things that I was interested in detail. Also, the projects allowed me to team up with people, which helped my teamwork skills. I think I learned a lot about myself as a team member. I learned that I should not pair up with people that I'm friends with, because then we would just get mixed up. We would talk all the time. I also learned that I'm pretty good at being the manager of a team, since I was able to organize the project so that I could do it efficiently. Even though our group wasn't the most efficient group, when we got to work, we were pretty efficient. An effective team is one that gets the job done and doesn't leave things to the last minute. Efficient teams usually make the best projects, since they're always on task and are always on the lookout to make the best project. Also, I want to thank you very much, Ms. Hoff. Thank you for a great year. See you next year.
Today, I'm going to talk about the college admissions cheating scandal occurred in March 2019. During this time, it came to light people who used corruption in many ways with the reason of making their sons get accepted to a high-level college. These cases came from economically privileged people and showed the country that sometimes having money can get you farther than making an effort. While I'm not surprised, I am appalled that this has been going on for years and that parents and people with money feel the entitlement they do. Thousands of students across the country, myself included, work tirelessly at several jobs, are heavily active in their communities, and maintain high and real grades and scores just to have a sliver of a chance to be accepted to our dream school and to be able to afford it without an enormous amount of student debt. Emily said, like Carsley School, Pennsylvania. Culpable people were charged with federal prosecutors of conspiracy to commit felony mail fraud and honest services mail fraud in violation of Title 18 United States Code, Section 1349, who did plead guilty to original charge, were additionally charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering in a superseding indictment. Of this event to the past is that the corruption of college admissions has been there for years. The thing is that now it has been officially investigated and been told to the whole country. People know the truth. Measures from the legal system from preventing this type of events will be harder. Most important, in contrast with how people felt before regarding social injustice during college admissions, now people will feel that are in a more fair process and that some aspects in the processes of the United States are becoming more transparent and fair. Two methodologies that worked the best for me were the videos and the group learning. The videos, because using from short videos to long movies, make me understand information from two senses, the visual and the auditive. Also, I am a movie person, and giving me the opportunity to learn something in the way I like, it's very helpful because I can enjoy it more. The group methodology helped me because sometimes I am wrong about how I think the information is, and having a group where we can discuss it and make everyone understand for the best of the group helped me a lot. What I learned about myself as a team member is that I like to be a leader even though sometimes I should not. Also, I learned that the best way to make a group efficient is to talk calmly the different ideas instead of desperate discuss them.
Open up the champagne, pop.